All the folks down in Hazard liked the Duke boys a lot, but the Hogg, who lived just north of Hazard, did not. The Hogg hated the Duke boys, the whole Duke tribe. Now I know what you're thinking. No one quite knows why. It could be that his hat wasn't screwed on quite right. It could be, perhaps, that his belt was too tight. But I think the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his hat, he stood there on race day hating the Dukes and being fat, staring down from the courthouse with a sour, hoggish stare at the revving of engines below in Hazard Square. For he knew everyone in Hazard below was anxiously waiting to see the General Lee go.
"And they're tuning their carbs,"
he said with a sneer,
"on account of tomorrow's the big race. It's practically here."
Then he growled with his chubby fingers nervously drumming.
"I must find a way to keep this race from coming."
For tomorrow he knew all them good old boys would wake up bright and early and make some noise. Oh, the noise, oh, the noise. Noise, noise, noise. That's one thing he hated. The noise, 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 noise. Then the folks young and old would sit down to a feast. And they'd feast, and they'd feast. They'd feast, 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 feast. They would meet at the boar's nest for some barbecued cow. That's just a little bit more than the Hogg will allow. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. All the folks down in Hazard, the tall and the small, would stand close together around the General Lee, and the Dukes would hit the horn, filling the streets with Dixie. They'd honk and they'd honk, and they'd honk, 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 honk. And when the Hogg was about to go for a shotgun, he heard it again. I wish I were in the land of cotton.
Since our Ridge Runner days, I've put up with it till now. But I must stop this race from coming. But how?
Then he got an idea, an awful idea. The Hogg got a wonderful, awful idea.
I'm gonna get them Dukes.
An idea popped in his brain, and he called in Sheriff Roscoe P. Coltrane, and he chuckled and chortled with hoggish delight.
"Roscoe, we're gonna get rid of that orange clunker car tonight. All I need is a deputy on duty."
The Hogg looked around, but since Enos was honest, there was none to be found. Did that stop old boss? Oh, no, the Hogg simply said.
"If I can't find a deputy, I'll make one instead."
So he called his cousin Cletus and went to the supply shed, and he placed a deputy hat on top of his head. Then he used his convertible caddy, since Roscoe had a horrendous crash. Then he loaded moonshine bottles along with Roscoe and Flash. Then the Hogg said,
"Let's go."
And the car started down toward the home where them good old boys lay asleep in their town. All their windows were dark, all thoughts were on races, all the Dukes were sound asleep, dreaming of car chases.
"There's that famous 01,
Old Boss Hogg hissed,
with the flag on the roof."
and grabbed a bottle in his fist. Then he slid through the window a rather tight pinch, but if Jesse could do it, then it should be a cinch. He got stuck only once for a moment or 3. Then he finally got his fat belly in the General Lee, where he placed bottles of moonshine all in a row.
"More bottles,"
he grinned.
"Hurry up, Roscoe."
Then he climbed out the window. I'm surprised that he could. Around to the front where he opened the hood. He yanked wires, fuel pump, and gave the wires some pruning. He grabbed the air cleaner, vacuum lines, and gave the carb a detuning. He stuffed them in bags. Then the Hogg took the sack and stashed all the parts one by one in the trunk of his Cadillac. And the Hogg grabbed a hose so he could siphon the gas. But the Duke's lights came on as he tried to slip past. He turned around fast, and right there on the porch was Sweet Daisy in her famous short shorts. The Hogg had been caught by the sweet country gal, who'd heard some of the sounds from Roscoe and his fat pal. She stared at the Hogg and said,
"Boss, would you please explain to me why you see fit to mess with the boys generally?"
But you know that old Hogg was so smart and so slick, he thought up a lie, and thought it up quick.
"Why, out of concern,"
the grinning Hogg lied.
"There's a headlight on this car that won't light on one side. So I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there and bring it back here."
And his fib seemed to work. Then he patted her head. He said,
"See you at the boar's nest,"
and sent her to bed. Now I know what you're thinking, and from what we've seen before, when they was handing out smarts, Daisy wasn't standing behind the door. Then the last thing Boss took was a tank full of fuel. Then he grinned as he imagined the Dukes racing with Ma Dean, the mule. Then he had Roscoe hook up a chain to tow away their car, knowing that even if they found it, they wouldn't get too far. Then he bulldozed the bridge with a giddy shriek, 'cause he knew there was no way across Dry Creek. It was 1/4 past dawn, and he found a tall tree, the perfect place to stash the wrecked General Lee. It took him and Roscoe a while to get back to town. With the bridge torn up, they had to drive around. Getting back to the courthouse, he ran up the stairs, he and Roscoe waiting to see the reaction in Hazard Square.
"Ain't that just too bad, Roscoe?"
he said while grinning.
"For once this year, the Dukes won't be winning."
All Roscoe could say was "Coo, coo, coo," at the thought of those boys crying boo-hoo.
"That's a noise,"
said the Hogg,
"that I simply must hear."
So he paused, and the Hogg put his hand to his ear. And he did hear a sound rising over the hills. It started in low, then it started to build. But the sound wasn't sad while the Hogg wasn't shy. The rumbling in the distance was a Mopar big block. He stared down at Hazard. The Hogg popped his eyes. Then he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Try as he might, he can't ruin their fun, because coming down Main Street was a big old 01. Where once there were curves, it was straighter than that. Where once there were hills, they were all flat. Turns out one thing I forgot to mention was during the night while Daisy got their attention, since everyone thought they were asleep in their bunk, Bo, Luke, and Cooter all hid in the trunk. So there was Roscoe and Boss like a couple of fools. Cooter even had time to load up his tools.
"Now wait a minute,"
said Boss.
"there's no gas in that tank."
Then Bo said,
"Boss, you're the man we should thank. You see, the reason our car is running just fine is that somebody was kind enough to provide moonshine."
Boss was a crafty one, not easy to defeat. But one thing about old Boss, he sure likes to eat. So they raced to the boar's nest, and what did they hear? Boss whistling Dixie and shouting,
"Free beer."
Now Boss ain't never gonna change, that's all I can say. But I think he was a little less bothered by the Dukes since that day, 'cause he knew as he stuffed the barbecue beef in his mouth that you just can't stop the fighting spirit of the South.